Let's continue to delve into the history of the Dark Ages. Once the African kingdom of the Vandals collapsed in 3 months, but in Italy even the capture of Rome was not enough for the barbarians to lose heart and surrender to the mercy of the empire. Vitiges, even if he did not show himself a brilliant strategist, and even did not show himself a good tactician, showed nevertheless his stubborn temperament and willingness to fight to the end. Even inept resistance brought Belisarius such an abundance of problems that the solution of intermediate problems took him the entire campaign of 539th year. General John's detachments were overhanging Ravenna, having taken Ariminum, or otherwise Rimini, and several other towns. Vitiges, in retreating northward from Rome, had left detachments of Goths in many cities, and it happened that when he reached John, unblocked his capital, and in turn besieged the Greek, there were several fortresses with the Ostgoths between Belisarius and John. Nevertheless, Belisarius's adventurous nature allowed him to fragment his small army once again and send some of his soldiers to northern Italy. Ambassadors from Mediolanus, or in modern parlance Milan, urged the Greeks, saying that the Goths had taken all their soldiers and the vast valley of the Po River was ready to cross over to the Byzantine side without a fight. The fleet of Belisarius indeed sailed as far as Liguria, landed near Genoa, and soon the city of Milan solemnly welcomed the imperial soldiers. Vitiges bought this threat by sending a detachment of his nephew Uriah northward. Suddenly Milan was besieged by a large army of Ostgoths, in which most of the soldiers were Burgundians, who came to the aid of their neighbors. Formerly, Burgundy had already been divided among themselves for several years as the kings of the Franks, who in turn formally pledged to support Byzantium. However, the fact remains that the Burgundians, to all the reproaches of the Greeks, replied that the Franks are not an order to them, they act independently. As a result, the whole campaign of that year was reduced to the siege of cities. In the north, the Greeks at Milan sat besieged by the Burgundians and Uriah. The detachment that Belisarius had sent for deblockade was somewhere halfway to the Po River, and clearly did not have time to help. Near Ravenna Goths, Vitiges again built siege towers, and on their mistakes learned all the subtleties of siege skill, while to the south of them, to the rescue of his general, slowly made his way Belisarius. Not wanting to leave in the rear of large Gothic garrisons, he, like all participants in the war, conducted sieges of Italian cities, making their way to the north. It would seem that the arrival of large reinforcements from Constantinople will turn the outcome of the war in favor of Byzantium, but there is always some but. Quite a large army of 7,000 warriors came to the aid of Belisarius and landed in the region of Pitsin, where the Goths held in several cities, and in the largest city of the province was a garrison of 4,000 Germans. The command of such a large force was entrusted to the famous commander Narses. Narses, a gaunt and stunted but extremely vigorous Armenian for his 74 years, had already for many years held various posts in the capital and enjoyed the unlimited confidence of the emperor and empress. It was he who, during Nick's revolt, bribed some of the rebels and secured the beating of the rioters in the stadium. His position and instructions on arrival in Italy made him equal in rank to Belisarius, and soon disagreements began between the generals. Narses demanded to immediately unblock the besieged John. Belisarius wanted to take the fortified towns in Pitsina beforehand. It came to the point that one of the cities which besieged the Greeks could observe such a picture. On the morning when Belisarius announced a general assault, it turned out that Narses, who was besieging the same city from the other side, gathered the camp and moved away to the goal, which he considered more important. Since I began to tell you, I will add that the Goths on the walls of the city laughed heartily, but the same day they still surrendered, because Belisarius stubbornly attacked, and the defenders lacked water and agreed to surrender at the first assault. As a result, our heroes were able to unblock John and approach Ravenna, but at the same time came sad news from Milan. The garrison of Milan could not withstand the siege, the support did not come, and the Goths, having taken the city, let the Greeks go south. The inhabitants of Milan were brutally killed. Women and children were enslaved by the Goths to the Burgundians. War in general did not spare the locals, and Procopius of Caesarea, traveling with Belisarius, notes that in the current year in Italy again there was no harvest, so that the country was rampant terrible famine. In a few sentences for the story, Procopius describes the skin covering the bones of starving people, the blue or even black color of the skin, as if the starving people were burned, the death of people who had not eaten for so long that they were no longer able to take food. The country ate rats, dogs, and other meats not eaten in ordinary times. Both the common people and the warriors gathered and ate grass. Here and there stories of cannibalism crept in. Belisarius, in the next report on his successes and failures, blamed the surrender of Milan on the collapse of the management of the armies because of the presence of Narses, and the Armenian was recalled to the capital, where he was not punished at all and continued to work for the glory of the empire. Fighting at the end of the year stopped because of the invasion of the Franks. Apparently, having heard about the mess that was going on in Italy, Theodebert with a huge army of foot Franks crossed the Alps and invaded Italy, where near Milan 2 armies stood opposite each other. The Goths, after the capture of Milan, positioned themselves opposite the army of the Greeks, who were coming to the rescue of Milan but now stood hesitant to go back. The Franks first struck the Goths, who cheered the Germans, and after flying axes rushed away without a fight. The Goths, saving their lives, fled through the camp of the Greeks, who cheered the unexpected allies. However, the Franks did not stop to strike the Greeks as well. The Greeks also fled. Both Vitiges and Belisarius froze, waiting for the Franks' next move. Theodebert occupied both camps, sometimes stood in place, then went back. Suddenly in his army began mass dysentery, and the conquest of Italy was curtailed. The Franks, having struck terror, fled back to their Gaul. The year 540 had arrived. Whether it will bring relief to suffering Italy, we will learn in the sequel.